Welcome everyone to Dennis Miller's webinar today. The topic is engaging your board in fundraising, and we want to welcome you all, remind you that you are on mute. The slides will be sent to you after the webinar today, in case you're wondering. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them into your chat box. But otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to turn things right over to Dennis Miller. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Hello, everybody. As a nonprofit leadership coach for the past decade plus, I have advised numerous organizations, probably ranging about 200 around the country, on how to lock their true potential by working with them to improve their board, their leadership, their strategic vision, and philanthropy. One of the things that I think everybody knows is nonprofits today rely very heavily on the philanthropic support of others to ensure that they have the resources to carry out their mission. Particularly organizations that have been funded by public funding have seen a decline, and everybody wants to increase their philanthropic support. We've all seen hundreds of books and articles on fundraising. There's been extensive research on the subject. Thousands and thousands of people attend annual conferences hosted by all types of professional associations covering a wide range of topics on annual giving, major gifts, capital campaigns, donor software, online technologies. And despite all the knowledge about fundraising, most nonprofit organizations struggle to achieve philanthropic success. Today in a webinar, we're going to talk about why that is and how to engage your board in philanthropy. We're going to cover the typical day in the life of a development committee, see if that rings true for many of you. If the idea that I'd rather stick pins in my eyes than raise money is related to your board. Kind of go over really important reasons as to why people give money and why people give more money today than before, and why not. We're going to discuss my concept of the tin cup theory versus the investment theory of giving. We will discuss the characteristics of successful fundraising boards. And we're going to discuss how my statement about how to avoid the so-called fundraising Bermuda Triangle will address, I think, a few questions that every member of your board needs to answer, and we're going to address your questions as well. Move on to Maria. So I want everybody to think about a typical development committee that goes something along the lines like this. Your committee chair calls a meeting to order, and there's a great deal of discussion about who we're going to honor at this year's gala. Words come up. Sometimes it's mentioned that we have, we honored him before, or we honored his wife 2 years ago. So, all right, we go on to that. Who is going to chair the event, and we see who might chair the golf outing. We might discuss the sort of how much the wine tasting is going to cost, and then we have some discussions about wine tasting. And then the committee chair will ask everybody to please take out the list of major prospects that everybody submitted at a previous meeting to talk about which prospects we're going to go after in terms of raising money, and dead silence hits the room. The committee chair, being uncomfortable, says, okay, let's put those names aside to the next month's meeting when perhaps more people are attending the meeting, and let's discuss the table settings. Most times when I do a workshop, people chuckle at that idea because they know that's sort of true. How do we deal where the money is, not so much in special events, not so much in grants and corporate giving, but in individual giving? How do we change the mindset of people? Believe by the time we finish this webinar today, you will have a mindset change. Maria, let's move on. The biggest reason that you can do, the biggest thing to engage your board in philanthropy is something that's rarely talked about at any fundraising conference. It's rarely talked about in any book, but it comes from my personal experience is that the greatest thing you can do to engage your board is to increase their level of confidence. Now, why do most people feel they'd rather stick pins in their eyes? Well, the biggest reason is because it's the fear of rejection. Who would want to be rejected? And for most people, it's very personal. If I ask for money from my organization that I'm involved in my cause and they don't give, people feel very rejecting. So everybody would want to avoid that. It's natural. So think about those on the webinar today that have children. Perhaps they're older or perhaps they're younger. They start out in sort of a spring, summer season, perhaps playing t-ball. They build up experience and eventually move to pitching. And then eventually have a team and they run around the bases. And what does it do, all that training in t-ball? It builds their self-confidence. Well, can you imagine taking an 11-year-old boy or girl to a Major League Baseball stadium and ask them to hit Major League pitching? Of course not. They'd be devastated. They'd lose their self-confidence. And yet, to me, in my experience, having been the CEO of a major nonprofit medical center, having been the board chair of a major educational institution, I know what it's like to raise money and how to do it and how not to do it. And one of the things that we often forget is we have sometimes unrealistic expectations of our board members. Just because a board member is the president of the bank or the vice president of pharmaceutical sales does not mean that they have experience with raising money or that they're going to help you raise money. So building their confidence is crucial. Let's move on, Ray. When you take a look at this slide here, just take a look at it and see if anything stands out to you. The number one reason why people give money, believe it or not, is because they've been asked. Simple. If you ask someone, why did you give to them versus why did you give to them? They said, well, somebody asked me to. It's amazing. So they have to be asked. Number two, most people want to give. There's not arm twisting involved, and there's a little bit of they gave to me, so I gave to them. But for the most part, particularly in this country, people are very philanthropic and will be glad to support a cause that's appropriate to them. They also give to someone they trust and respect. It's really important. If you are going to be having someone on your board ask somebody else for financial support, so make sure the person who's going to be doing the asking is someone they trust and respect. I want you to take a look at this next bullet here, though. One of the biggest changes that's taken place, certainly over the past decade, but certainly in more and more years, is people give to success, not to distress. We're going to talk about in a few minutes here sort of the tin cup theory of fundraising, where most organizations are still at. They're still talking about giving to them and their needs, and or if we don't get money, we're going to go out of business. That's not a good strategy. We're going to talk about that. I think all of you would probably agree that people give to make a difference. They want to change the world. Some people want to give, and it's important to have a tax deduction. But look at the next bullet here. It says, well, people give to needs of those you serve, not your needs. And I want to ask yourself the question about when you are talking about raising money, whether you're talking about raising money at one of your special events or through your annual appeal, through a major gift process, or something even larger. Are you asking about your needs as an organization, or are you asking about the needs of those you serve? I would recommend you talk about the needs of those you serve here. Let's move on here, Maria. Okay. So what is the tin cup theory of fundraising? So when I was a young boy, well before there was Ticketron and online ticketing, my mom would take me occasionally, my brothers and I, to see the Radio City Musical Christmas Show. We'd take a bus, and we'd get to the Port Authority in New York City and come outside the bus terminal. And who was always outside the bus terminal looked like this disheveled-looking gentleman with a beard and hasn't taken a shower or bath in many years and had a tin cup selling pencils, sitting on a cardboard box or container to protect himself from the cold. And most of us see that as begging, and we perceive and grow up in our culture of thinking that fundraising is begging. It's about I need. Now, I do joke with people when I do live workshops that obviously the gentleman really was a franchise operation, and his driver picked him up and went out to the rest of Long Island and pretended to be at the show when he really wasn't, or not having a leg. But the point is, most of us see fundraising as begging. Most of our organizations are focused in on the tin cup theory of fundraising, which is about our needs, and that is why most board members feel not only a fear of rejection, but they don't have the confidence that's needed to ask people for money. Let's move to the next slide. So what is the investment theory of fundraising? Well, a true story was probably a decade ago, I worked with a client that wanted to raise $1 million. Now, I am no longer a fundraising consultant, but I do work with boards on how to engage your board in philanthropy, among other things I do. But the true story was I asked this organization if they could tell me their top 2 achievements. It was dead silence. This organization was involved in domestic violence and sexual assault. I asked them the top 2 achievements as related to a fundraising workshop. Finally, a woman on the other part of the room says, well, we did our budget on time. No one would care. Finally, a woman in the back of the room. So we do this program for children called PALS, P-A-L-S. It stands for Peace and Alternative Learning System. I said, phenomenal. How do you communicate that to your stakeholders? She indicated we really don't. We don't do a good job of that. And so one of the things that we as what we need to do in our nonprofit sector and in our communities and our organizations, that it's uncomfortable for a lot of us because we don't go into it this way. We go into it from a very mission point of view, which is fine, but it's not all we need. We need, amongst our boards, to start talking about our achievements and our success. If you understand, as we on the previous slide, about why people give money, and that people do give money, but they want to give the success, not the stress. And all you've heard of organizations that seem to be so successful and they keep getting more money because people give the success. Now, when you are in distress and without this money, I understand that. And that may be a goal of yours, but it cannot be the message you want to have here. So I want you to be thinking differently from giving to our needs and giving to us because without us we're going to go out of business. So I want you to think about all of you on the call today, whether you're involved in community service or behavioral health care or in counseling and a whole range of activities and education and literacy. I see all the people on the call are involved in educational organizations for special kids. I need you to be thinking about and talking more about your success. One of the things it does, it engages your board members. Board members can relate to success and achievement more than they can about your own needs. Most times board members probably go to a meeting and see you more than maybe not even more than 10 times a year. And we expect that they're going to know about us, but they don't hear. So it's really, really important that we talk about the investment theory of fundraising. Now, before we move on, I want to talk about a few other things here in terms of how you can help build your competency board members. So, obviously, how do you create a meaningful and fulfilling board experience? Well, you got to find a way to tap into their unique experience and knowledge and ask them to bring new ideas to the table and ask questions. It's amazing to me when I attend board meetings of some of my clients, and the board meetings are really boring. They're filled with just reports, which are important, finance report, ED report, building grounds report, development report, but there's not enough discussion about a strategic issue that engages the board, and the board chair and or CEO make sure everybody's engaged. Don't allow your board members to leave their talents and common sense at the door. So one of the ways of building confidence is having really effective board meetings. Encourage them to become leaders and partners in your success. The more your board feels responsible for your success, the more likely he or she will become engaged in your process. Develop a results-oriented and a forward-looking organization that strives for excellence. When the entire organization is committed to achievements, the board will become much more involved and committed to ensuring that you have the resources. Periodically re-examine your mission and purpose. Passion develops once a deeper understanding of why your organization exists is internalized. The higher the level of passion, the greater level of engagement. As we talked about under the investment theory, Discuss your outcomes and results of your program, not just the activities of each. Develop measures of success. Monitor your progress. The board will become much more engaged in fundraising when you can demonstrate your success to the community. You also want to inquire about the image of your organization and the community prepared to address ways to improve it if necessary. The board will feel more comfortable raising money when your organization has a solid reputation than one with a poor image. Communicate to your stakeholders on all activities of your organization with all your success. Your stakeholders, your donors, your volunteers, your employees, to everybody you can. Develop an effective marketing communication strategy to talk about how you're building the success of the community and how you are obviously becoming a positive brand identity. We're going to talk about a few other questions that the board may need to be asked a little bit later here. Let's move on, Maria. Characteristics of a successful fundraising board. This is interesting because if you ask members of the board without them seeing this slide, what are the characteristics of a successful fundraising board? The one answer that they're not expecting is the issue of integrity. And when they hear that the number one issue of a successful fundraising board is integrity and then passion, they say, well, we're like that. So it also, it can build their confidence. Your quest for excellence is a common characteristic of a successful board. How many of you have an inspiring vision? How many of you have a vision statement that is refreshing, that is new, that is inspiring, that is realistic, that's attainable? How many of you don't or have a mission statement, perhaps don't have a vision statement or had one 2 years ago, and it's really, really crucial that you have an inspiring vision? Characteristics of a successful board also. Strategic thinkers, people who think strategically. People have good governance. There's a positive attitude. Yes, we can is the attitude. Oftentimes it's like, well, we tried a couple of years ago, it didn't work, it cost us too much money, all the reasons why you can't do things, and yet you have to have a positive attitude. And obviously, you want to be able to cultivate and solicit people here, and very much so you want to create an organization worthy of the gift. But I want to talk about something else along this line of a successful fundraising board. To many of us, and to many organizations, a development department is viewed as another department, like human resources, like finance. And oftentimes, development efforts are disconnected from the work of the organization. The boards don't often see the connection between the organization's success and the success of their fundraising efforts. Oftentimes, the board members have very little knowledge and experience with philanthropy. They wonder why the development officers often don't. They wonder why development officers often move from place to place year after year. The average tenure of a development officer in America today is about 18 months. And so it's important for development and philanthropy to be incorporated into the culture and not be used just as a department. Let's move on. So as we're building self-confidence amongst our board members, and they have a better understanding that people give the success, not the stress, and we are talking more about our achievements and investing in success, how do we avoid what I call the fundraising Bermuda Triangle to understand the three roles of the board, the development officer, and the CEO, so the development officer doesn't feel like he or she is out there on their own without support? Because oftentimes, we say, well, geez, we just hired a development officer. How much money is she raising, Harry? And Harry says, I don't know. She'll get there. And they feel alone. So what is the role of the CEO as it relates to fundraising? I believe the number one thing is to be the chief sales officer, to be talking about the success of the organization, building energy and motivation and enthusiasm, and feeling, wow, that organization is really doing a lot of great things. Their also role is to be the chief relationship officer. That means not only building internal relationships with people, employees and donors and volunteers, but outside the organization, being involved in your community, being involved in your chamber, being involved in your local business community, be involved in your school system, be a relationship builder so people know who you are, and obviously people will give when they feel connected to an organization. Also, part of the role of the CEO is to be the brand builder. It's really important to be, today, how do you distinguish yourself from other organizations? How do you make a difference? How are you different from another organization? And again, we go back to achievements. The role of the CEO should be chief communicator. How do I, as CEO or executive director, continually communicate my success to my board, to my employees, to my donors, my volunteers, and my community? How do we communicate that? So that's the role of the CEO: sales officer, relationship officer, brand builder, and communicator. What is the role? Let's go on next year. What's the role? What's the role of the development officer? Well, I think it's a couple things. I think the board and the CEO are expecting that a development officer will come in and build a comprehensive and diversified plan for raising money. Now, far too many of us, we automatically think, and I've seen this with clients, which corporation can we go to? And they all think about getting grants out there. Now, that's important, but on a diversified fundraising plan, we draw a pie chart. The larger percentage of fundraising sources are individuals, almost 80% in this country. Individuals, family foundations, not corporations, not businesses. And so though we want to have a diversified plan of some grants here, the money is in individuals, and the role of a development officer needs to build a comprehensive plan that has a game plan for going after individual gifts, as well as corporate and foundation giving, annual appeals, planned giving, etc. Development officers have a case for support. I'd ask you, do you have a case for support today? Do you have a reason, a 4 to 5 page document that explains who you are, why you're asking for money, how you're going to use that money, ways that people can give, and more importantly, how does giving benefit the donor? How does the donor benefit from the contribution? That's crucial. The development office needs to quarterback all this. The CEO and executive director has a lot of things on his or her plate, and the board members, they say, may come in once a month, maybe not. The development also has to be the quarterback and follow up on that. Has to identify and get prospect relations from people. Now, one of the things that I always ask for, and I tell my clients the same, if you have 10 people on your board, ask your board if they will help identify or introduce you to, over the next 6 months, 3 people or organizations, not 10, 3. That usually is an easy number for people to handle and for them to think about. So if you have now 10 people on your board, and you have now 3 prospects of introduction, maybe a breakfast meeting, a lunch meeting, a cup of coffee. Now you have 30 people that you haven't had before. The main reason why development officers leave is they don't feel the board and the CEO is helping them open up doors. Also, the development officer needs to be an educator. To go over and constantly educate the board on what's happening in the world of fundraising. They need to be a solicitor as well as a CEO, and then to acknowledge the gifts. Now, one thing that I find that an organization can do easily to help increase the confidence of your board is have a stewardship night. I don't know how many people involved in the webinar today have had a stewardship night, but what is a stewardship night? So the organization, whatever size you may be, will try to develop maybe 5 to no more than 10 names of donors for each board member. And they will provide a list of the person, their home phone number. And they will script. And the script goes something like this. I'm just calling. My name is Dennis Miller. I'm from so-and-so organization. I want to thank you on behalf of the organization for making a gift of such. Most people are surprised that you're just asking them to thank them. They think you're asking for money. So because of your gift, we're able to do this year. We're able to do something for children. We're able to do this for families. And so to acknowledge them and thank them and not ask for any money, what usually happens is the board members feel increased self-confidence. I feel a connection. I feel good about thanking someone. There may have been apprehension, anxiety about calling people, but when it's over, if they call just 2 people a night over a course of 2 or 3 weeks, they will have increased their self-confidence. So I think one of the things that the development should do is have a solution night. Now, what's the role of the board? Let's move on. Well, everybody says I need my board to ask for money, and I probably one of the people that will argue that actually it's not what I want the board to do per se. Yes, I want my board to help get sponsorships, but most board members have very little training in asking anybody for money, and if they do ask, they'll ask for too little. And if someone makes a gift of $1,000 when they give $10,000, they'll be happy to take it. The number one role I want from my board is I want them to be my ambassador. I want them to proudly let everybody know in their business world, in their professional world, in their social organizations and clubs, in their neighborhood and their community that you're advocating on behalf of the organization. So the number one thing I want from my board is to be an ambassador. Number 2, I want my board to help me cultivate relationships. I'm not asking them to raise any money for me yet personally. I want them to introduce me to someone that they think I should be introduced to. That is cultivation. That is how one will not only build up self-confidence, but that's where the acts will take place to increase contributions, particularly from individuals. I want them to be a participator. Many nonprofits have numerous special events. It's not realistic to have everybody go to your golf outing, your gala, your wine tasting, and whatever. But I want them to be active. I want them to attend at least one and be involved in it. And so the board members should be a participator at some levels, be a supporter, bring their friends to it. I think the role of the board also is to be a wealth identifier. And what I mean by that is that a lot of organizations don't. A lot of them have successful prospect research technology to identify the wealth of potential donor. But many times you can just identify whether or not what you know about them. Do they have a nice home? Do they? One sign of a potential donor is do they make political contributions? Do you see their name on your annual reports that they're making contributions? So do you know anything about them, their employment, their professional history? So it's very helpful to have that. And not last but the important role of the board is everybody on the board must make a contribution to the organization on an annual basis. That's a must. And I don't care, from my experience, what the amount is. Now, I know that some of you on the call, on the webinar today and others have a specific, give or get policy. Now, I think give or get policies were important to sort of turn the board around to understand there's a requirement to give and sort of change the culture of heavy lifting. But I really think that, I would say you should give what you can, be able to look yourself in the mirror and knowing you made a significant gift to you. Years and years ago, there was an organization I was involved with that prior to my getting there had a give or get policy, and who was the one person that had to leave the board was the local minister. Said, I can't give or get $7,500 or $5,000, whatever the number was. And yet the one person they lost was the one person who was the most respected in the community here. So I'm not a big believer in give or get because I also think give or gets create a ceiling. So if you say the give or get is $10,000, that people get $10,000 and they stop. They don't have to give any more. And so look at the role of the board. Look at the role of the development officer. Look at the role of the CEO and ask yourselves, is my board stepping up to the plate and playing that role, or am I asking them to do things that they are not comfortable in or not confident in? Is myself as a CEO, and many of you on the call today are CEOs or executive directors of the organization, am I playing my role? Am I being supportive to my development officer? And from a development officer, am I carrying forward my job to both educate and put a plan together for the board and report on that and kind of quarterback it, but knowing I can't do this alone? And so I see so many organizations where the tripartnership between the board and the development officer and the CEO is broken down, and everybody wonders why this is not happening. So let's review. Let's go to the next slide before we review. Okay. So before we answer these questions here, let's go back and take a review of kind of what we did here today. The topic of today's webinar was how to engage your board. I was with a gentleman the other day, this week, for lunch, who was complaining that he was asking people on his board to give him money, and then they don't show up at meetings and return his phone calls. Of course they're not. There's no cultivation of those people into the mission. There's no cultivation into the passion. There's no cultivation into the organization here. People, when they feel connected to the organization, when they feel the sense of the important role that the organization plays, when they see firsthand those clients that may come into a board meeting to explain how that organization has helped them, and when people feel confident, when people feel self-confident that I can help, they become much more engaged in philanthropy than they've ever been before. And think about all of us. What's the one thing we always do? We always have, all of us have something that we put off. We usually put off because we're anxious about it. We put off doing our taxes. We put off doing our term paper. We put off something that we need to do because it just makes us a little anxious. And yet we oftentimes ask board members and drive these things home with them at every board meeting about reminding them about their roles and responsibilities. And to me, driving that process is like asking your kids to clean their room. You're wasting your time. I always tell people, just let the pizza boxes fill up in the room so they can't breathe. They'll eventually clean them out here. But asking your board members over and over, reminding them of their roles, so I understand that's kind of what you're trying to achieve, it's not going to achieve your goal. The way to engage your board is obviously to help them become self-confident. If you realize that if I can help my board members by small successes, one step at a time, be at least announce the gift of someone else, makes them feel good. To be involved in a solicitation night makes them feel good. To ask them to take on the idea of identifying free prospects is not outside the realm of possibility, can make them feel good. When people feel they're contributing, not just financial, but contributing to the movement of the organization forward, they will increase their self-confidence and become more engaged in philanthropy. So what are 3 questions that every board member needs to answer? This is a great experiment to do at a board meeting, at a retreat. This is a great, how to engage your board in philanthropy or fundraising is a great retreat topic or a great workshop for your board. But have this question and understood. What's the value we provide to our community? How many of you on the webinar today can say with a high degree of confidence that your board members from A to Z can easily communicate the value you provide to the community? Number 2, how many of the board members, if they were asked what your top achievements are, how many can articulate your top achievements? How many can argue about can articulate the results of your programs? Not just how many people you serve, which is important, but the results and the outcomes of those programs, the difference you've made. And third, among others, why are you worthy of a gift? I think if you spend some time at a board meeting and having these questions asked about what's our value to our community, what are our achievements, why are we worthy of a gift, you come up with the answer is that why giving to you gives us success. Why giving to you makes a difference in the lives of people in your community. So I think if you can think about what we discussed today, about moving away from the tin cup theory, about moving away from I need, we need, to those we serve need. For every dollar we get, or those we serve do X. We focus it on those we serve, we do remarkably better. One closing story. I do remember many, many years ago, a client had a major. They were prepared and ready for the first time ever to have a major gala, and it was the same organization that where they could not articulate their achievements. And there was 400 people in this wonderful event, black tie affair. Everybody was dressed to the hills, and one of their clients got up and told her story about what it was like in her life to be abused domestically with her kids and all the tragedy that happened and but how this organization turned their life around and a remarkably impact it had on those in the audience. I mean, in the audience of that gala. So it's really, really important that we communicate who we are, and the more we do that, the more we'll build our self-confidence. I think, Maria, at this point, we'll take some questions that the members of the webinar have, if any.
Okay, so if anybody does have any questions that they would like to ask Dennis, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and type that into the chat box at this time, and then we'll go ahead and submit those to Dennis. You know, Dennis, I did have a question that popped into my own mind that I'd like to ask you, and that is this: often. When board members try to extol the virtues of their organizations where they're volunteering, they get a little bit caught up and tongue-tied because they feel like they've got to be able to spew statistics, right? You know, in terms of their successes, in terms of why it's worthy investing in that organization. And I think that sometimes they forget that it's those stories, those impact stories that that are important. I know that this is something that I've been intimately following ever since my interest was piqued from attending American Marketing Association conferences the last 2 years, and I'll be going to another one coming up this summer. And storytelling and the way stories are told. So, you know, what would you suggest that an organization does to perhaps find those best case scenario stories that are going to be those tug at your heartstring stories? How can they find those and then convey those stories to board members in such a way that they can retell the story? So can you give some tips around that?
Yeah, I'd be good. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, I'll give you my own experience with this, but what the webinar was about today was not the science of fundraising. It wasn't a detailed explanation about how to get a major gift, how to do a capital campaign, what to say in your annual appeal, et cetera, et cetera. It was a little bit, but not much. It was really about the art, okay? So one of the things I recommend is that for that storytelling, that, and every board member should have that little script in their head, is I think it's great when they actually see the people that your organization helps, if it's possible. I know there's a lot of confidentiality involved in it, but there are a lot of people, a range of world of mental health, education, families that are grateful. I think the more at a board meeting you can physically, have someone come on and tell that story, do it, show a video to your board about a story that's happened here. I think we don't realize always the potential of appealing both to our hearts and our minds. And I think that happens even when we do strategic plans that are sort of left out of the heart and mind. I think it's important that we as executive directors, we as CEOs, constantly communicate at all of our events or meetings the success we're having in the eyes of the others, in the eyes of those we serve here. You know, too often, it's about us, and it's really about them. So in answering your question, I mean, one of the great things is having more stories. And I know in terms of my own experience, Maria, when I became president CEO, of a very large medical center here in our state, and I didn't read any books about fundraising per se, but I worked hard with my team to transform the organization from sort of being financially in trouble to financially successful, change the image in the community, and built upon our programs, et cetera, but became sort of storytelling. There was a feeling in the room earlier when I first got there, so the sense of of a lot of problems and feeling inferior and not a really good place. And when people start to feel, when they start to feel that, wow, look what we're doing. Look what we're doing in behavioral health care. Look what we're doing in schools. Look what we're doing in literacy. Look what we're doing, with the Red Cross. Look what we're doing, with disabilities. Look what we're doing. When people make that connection to the people you're serving, I think that's the best thing. Not statistics that, we are so large, that's fine. But I don't think statistics that just, we can say, we're a $10 million nonprofit mental health organization in Glassboro or in Newark or whatever. I think it's to say we've served, we graduate, we've transformed 100 lives a year. I think that the more you tell those stories, I think the better off you really are. I think that's what makes it different. That's when people relate to that. And I think that's what we miss often of that.
Right, right. Now, one comment did come in as you and I were chatting, and that was as follows. They say here that the policy of every board member to giving to the organization according to their ability versus that give or get is excellent. She asks, should this policy be incorporated into the bylaws? So basically that policy of every board, we have to have 100% board participation at whatever level you can do. Should that be part of bylaws?
Two things. I don't know. I mean, it can, but here's what I would say. I look at bylaws quite a bit when I do my board assessments and organizations and so forth. I think you can certainly put into your bylaws a requirement of new member. That's fine. But I do think, besides bylaws, I think it's a cultural thing. I think that far too many of us, and it's myself and part of many of us, when we're recruiting a board member, we often don't bring up the financial responsibility of being a board member. We ourselves are uncomfortable sometimes. Yes, I'm not saying everybody, but sometimes we are. So when we're recruiting, talking about people joining our board, we need to be able to also talk about, so they know going in that they're going to be required to make a contribution within their means. So you're not scaring them, And I don't think, by the way, the vast majority of America's nonprofits, are not the metropolitan theme of natural history in New York City that corporate executives are on Fifth Avenue in New York here. Most of these organizations are sort of small, mid-sized organizations doing great work in the community, but need additional resources and don't seem to have a way. How do we get that? And I know that those of people that have attended my workshops or have been my clients, there is a way to dramatically change the culture in an organization from what I call the tin cup to the investment theory. So I think that the most important thing is to have it become part of the culture,
right?
And have it discussed at time of recruitment. Again, it's okay to put in the bylaws. There's no reason why I'd say not to. But again, that's almost a little bit like, the rules and regulations, you got to clean up your room when it's like, most kids, they may not. But I think, it's not about giving outside demands about the rules and regulations. It's, what your responsibility is. It's all about creating a culture that you want to do it. That's what I'm saying.
Right. So right from the moment of recruitment to right through onboarding of those board members, make sure that philanthropy is part of the discussion.
Yeah, and somebody wants to do it. There shouldn't be demands that what you got to do. It's what you want to do, and do within your means here. And I had a situation many years ago where I actually had a physician come to me and say, I just can't afford those levels of gifts. And said, if you give $10, give $100, just because say we have 100% participation. I understand. Just, you don't ever want to embarrass anybody. You should never be embarrassed. And everybody should be allowed to have confidentiality. I do not think it's appropriate to let the board know about the gifts of other people on the board. I think that's a private matter. Certainly there are people that have naming opportunities. You're going to get a sense of what that is here. That's a private matter. And no one should ever be embarrassed or pushed or bullied. But clearly, when you're on the board and you were going to go to another organization and ask for support, or an individual, and you can't say my own board supports me 100%, then people say, well, why should I get it? So I wouldn't answer it the bylaws. I'd say it's part of the culture.
Right, right. Well, there have not been any additional questions that have come in. So what I'm going to do here is at this time is to make sure everybody knows that Your books are available and are chock full of great advice with regard to this topic. Any one in particular focus more on fundraising?
Well, the one that really begins to address it is the nonprofit board therapist. I think it deals with 4 topics. That one, that how do we improve both board governance, how do we create inspirational leadership vision, but how do we tap into philanthropic success? That's a really good book and article about that for the board here. I think I wrote that book because of the many clients I deal with that I see, they struggle with philanthropy, but they also their board isn't functioning at the level that it needs to be. Board meetings sometimes boring. There's no real strategic plan, or there's not one to achieve success or a vision. And so how do you tie in strategic planning, visionary thinking, good boards, high-performing boards, effective leadership? That would be that book. And the Power of Strategic Alignment, it addresses it as well, but it addresses as part of the strategic planning effort about having everybody aligned to achieve your vision. And so it'll tap into that as well.
Okay.
The book about the 4 pillars of nonprofit leadership addresses the issue about how to build relationships, how to communicate your success and be passionate, obviously vision, but also about being business-minded, that nonprofit is your tax status, not your business plan.
Okay.
And I welcome everybody to, if you have other questions, feel free to email me at dennis@denniscmiller.com. I'd be happy to have a brief complimentary session with anybody on the board about an issue. And I certainly do a tremendous amount of workshops for all of my nonprofit clients in this country, metropolitan area. I facilitate a tremendous amount of retreats, strategic plans, and board and organizational performances, and provide leadership coaching. So if I can help anybody with this and you feel that you'd like to engage your board more, please get a hold of me.
Great, and thank you so much again, everyone. We will be sending you the slides as well as a link to this recording, so if you had any board members that you thought should have been listening in and couldn't make it today, we'd appreciate you sharing this recording with them. And this concludes our series of 6 webinars that Dennis has done for 2015. We've done one a month since January. They are all on his YouTube page, and this one will be put there as well. And so, again, if you have any staff or board, you can visit Dennis's website. From there, you will see the YouTube icon on the site, and go ahead and click through to that so you have access to all of the webinar series. So, again, thank you, everybody. Dennis, great job. Thanks again. And we look forward to developing more content for you in the future, both in terms of webinar content, but also some in-person workshops that we can develop for the community. So again, Dennis, thanks so much.
Thank you, Maria, and I thank all of my colleagues who participated in today's webinar, and some of the previous ones will be in touch real soon.
Have a great day, everyone.